Now, in the midst of the controversy surrounding confirmation hearings on Trump's CIA pick Gina Haspel, the former vice president and war criminal Dick Cheney has decided to weigh in on the issue of so-called enhanced interrogation once again during an interview on Fox Business, where apparently they don't like to talk about business whatsoever, which is very strange. Now, let me show you what he said. He said, if it were my call, I would not discontinue those programs. I'd have them active and ready to go. This is when he was talking with Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo. Now, she also said, quote, or he also said, sorry, and I'd go back and study them and learn. So you would bring back the torture, you would have it active and ready to go, and then you'd go back and learn. Well, that's very interesting. We'll get to that part in a minute. But first, here's Dick Cheney saying torture is awesome. Hey, we should bring back illegal torture. I mean, did we expect anything from Dick freaking Cheney? Now he continues. I think the techniques we used were not torture. A lot of people try to call it that, but it wasn't deemed torture at the time. See, we didn't deem it torture, so it's not torture. Well, again, that is a lie. For one, okay, let me go to what one of the things that we used, this enhanced interrogation methods that we used during the time that Cheney was vice president. Well, one of them was waterboarding. This essentially simulated torture, or I'm sorry, simulated drowning. That is torture. Also used something called rectal feeding. So, and look, I don't think I should have to explain that any further. Now, all those things were classified as torture long before the Senate officially outlawed it back in 2015. Again, that was international and domestic law. That kind of so-called enhanced interrogation was illegal. So, look, Dick Cheney is a 100% lying right there. Saying, well, it wasn't deemed torture at the time. Well, by who? You? The Bush administration? That's not the same as international law. And under international law, your administration, which, let's be honest about who actually ran the administration, was engaged in illegal torture. Now, Dick Cheney, that also means Dick Cheney is a war criminal. You know who else is a war criminal? Gina Haspel, who also helped that torture when she ran a black site. Even though she didn't personally engage in the torture, she presided over it. Now, that's not clear enough. Dick Cheney goes on. He says, people want to go back and try to rewrite history. Well, that's funny because you're doing that right now. But he says, if it were my call, I'd do it again. I'd do it again. Now, I would torture those people, is Dick Cheney, over and over again and again. That is why Dick Cheney should be in prison, among many other things, right? Now, of course, he says, but look, the reason that I want to go back to torture is because it actually worked. I mean, we have to torture people if we want to get actionable intelligence. Quote, you tell me that the only method we have is please, please, pretty please, tell us what you know. Well, I don't buy that. Well, of course you wouldn't. Now, here's the thing, right? So he says, look, we have to do torture because what are we going to do? We can ask him pretty please? I mean, that doesn't work. Well, you know what else doesn't work? Torture. The very thing that you are advocating for doesn't actually work to get actionable intelligence. You know why? Well, look, let me explain. Well, for one, okay, if torture worked, then you wouldn't have to, I mean, maybe you could explain why we waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed 80 plus times. I mean, come on. No, what torture leads to is false information. Do you know why that leads to false information? Because the person who is being tortured will basically say anything to make it stop. And according to a 2009 paper by neuroscientist Shane Amara, the stress caused by torture is likely to impair regions of the brain associated with memory, making it even more likely that subjects will lie or parrot information picked up by their captors. So it hurts your memory, and it makes you more likely to say what they want to hear. So that's false confessions, right? Now, interestingly enough, surprisingly enough, do you know what actually does work? Now, again, Cheney went back and said, you tell me the only method we have is please, please, pretty please tell us what you know. Well, actually, that does kind of work. Now, I know some of you are probably like, get the fuck out of here, libtard. What are you talking about? No, you have to torture these people. You have to rectal feed them and all that stuff if you want to get any intelligence. Well, let me show you who actually came up with a method that does work. Back in World War II, the Nazis, Nazis, right, employed an interrogator named Hans Scharf. Now, what did Hans Scharf do? Now, you would assume that, oh, he's a Nazi, right? Well, he must have used some brutal interrogation methods, right? In this case, no. What he actually used was kindness and empathy. I'm not kidding. During the war, Scharf interviewed roughly 500 American and British pilots who were highly trained in keeping secrets from the enemy. So, now instead of using standard interrogation techniques, Scharf would instead go on strolls with pilots through the countryside and offer them baked goods and strike up what they call friendly conversations. Well, that's very interesting. So, now, basically, he's playing incredibly nice, right? Now, Dick Cheney will look at that and go, oh, look at that. The Nazis playing nice. I want to out-Nazi the Nazis. And oddly enough, that's exactly what enhanced interrogation does. But again, Hans Scharf had something a little bit different in mind. So how did that actually work? Well, according to Eric Horowitz, writing in the Pacific Standard, quote, when the interrogator erroneously suggested that a chemical shortage was responsible for American tracer bullets leaving white rather than red smoke, the pilot quickly corrected him with the information German commanders sought. No, there was no chemical shortage. The white smoke was supposed to signal the pilots that they would soon be out of ammunition. So basically, this is a little bit of mental jujitsu, right? You're basically trying to get them to admit something by giving them, I guess, sort of false information or incomplete information. But when they're relaxed, they're more likely to volunteer that information. So, now, again, what are the results of this, right? Out of the 500 pilots Scharf interviewed, he only failed to get information out of just 20 of them. So 480 times out of 500, he got the information that he was looking for. Now, I don't think so-called enhanced interrogation has that kind of track record. Now, his method, which is now called the Scharf technique, has actually been used since then by the FBI. The FBI's so-called high-value interrogation group, which is a task force of federal agents who interrogate high-profile detainees. So now we've taken that method, and the FBI now uses that method because it's effective. It actually works. In fact, they did studies on how it works, and the science says it absolutely works. Now, what does it actually contain? How do you actually, what is the Scharf method broken down? Well, basically, it consists of 5 basic tenets. You're supposed to employ a friendly demeanor, don't press for information, in place of questions, present statements for the captive to either prove or disprove, ignore new information, and most importantly, pretend that you already know what you desire to know. Now, that's what the method that they used, and that's why it was so effective. Now, to test its efficacy, researchers in 2016 interviewed participants who were given mock plans for a terrorist attack and asked about the details. In a series of 3 experiments, they used the Scharf method with some of the plotters, and the direct approach, pointed questions with others. The Scharf method technique yielded more new information and led sources to underestimate how much new information they revealed. The technique also left plotters confused about the motives of the interrogators, which in turn keep them off balance. So in reality, in a way, being nice actually works. Whereas rectal feeding and forced simulated drowning does not actually work. Now, to further buttress the point where torture does not work, the Senate back in 2014 released a report that found that CIA detainees subjected to what were then called enhanced interrogation techniques either produced no intelligence or they fabricated information resulting in faulty intelligence. And that goes back to what we were saying before, the fact that people under torture will say anything to get the torture to stop. Now, it also says that the CIA's own interrogators, the people that employed these methods, assessed that the most effective method for acquiring intelligence from detainees, including from detainees the CIA considered to be very high-value targets, was to confront the detainees with information they already acquired by the intelligence community. So, basically, using mind tricks is what works. Not punishment, not physical pain, not simulated drowning. So the torture methods that Cheney is advocating for, they don't work. They don't work, and in fact, they're counterproductive. But nonetheless, you think Dick Cheney cares? You think Dick Cheney doesn't know the Senate report? You think Dick Cheney hasn't read up on interrogation techniques? No, of course he has. But it doesn't matter to him because he loves torture. He is a sick war criminal. That's why he needs to get locked up. That's why he has to be in prison. Now, so look, Cheney, along with loving torture, also likes Gina Haspel, by the way, and supports her being the head of the CIA. In fact, he said, quote, "I think she'd be a great CIA director. I think she's done a great job in terms of the career she's built. And the people I know at the agency are very enthusiastic about having one of their own, so to speak, in the driver's seat at the CIA." So let me go through, just very quickly summarize Gina Haspel's CIA career. She ran a CIA black site that did torture and then supported the decision to destroy evidence of that torture. That's basically the highlights of her career. What a great career. What a great thing. Look, the reality is these two people, look, Gina Haspel does not belong as head of the CIA. You know where Gina Haspel belongs? She belongs in prison. And Dick Cheney does not belong on TV. He belongs in prison. That they are both war criminals and torturers. Say it along with me. Lock them up. Lock them up. Lock them up. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.